Hi and welcome back to the Wonders of Watercolour, where in today's video I'm going to show you how to paint this realistic eye in watercolour so that you can really up your watercolour painting game. Without any further ado, let's do it. I've done a really simple outline of the eye to begin with, and I'm working from a reference photograph which I will put up along with a line drawing if you want to join in on the Facebook group, and I'll put all the details in the description box below. I'm using a number 6 size spotter today, and the colours I've got mixed here are burnt umber with a tiny bit of permanent rose. I'm going to apply this straight onto the paper like this. This is kind of a nice loose easy wash that we have here, keeping out of the white area of the eye, just really simply putting it onto the paper. Slightly darker around the outside edge here and just on the upper part here. Super easy and super simple. The thing with painting skin or anything really in watercolour is to blend it. I'm using a damp brush to just blend it in like this, and I'm going to speed this up for you. You can start to think about building up some detail in the central part of the eye here. I want to apply some colour to the middle of the eye on the iris. Now I'm painting around the pupil because it's darker than the colour that we need, but I'm keeping out of this highlight that's right here. The reason I'm painting wet on wet for this part is because I want it to be really soft and blurry. I'm painting on mixed media paper because I think there's a lot of hype around expensive watercolour paper, and although it has its place, it's not always needed. I have on my palette here a mix of the original colour, which was burnt umber, with a little bit of sap green. Now these colours will need to be built up slowly because watercolour is all about building up layers, as you know. So we can just drop this colour in here like this. We can go over the pupil in the middle. We can also take it over a little bit of the highlight because the highlight isn't actually white. So we're just going to drop this in for now. I'm just popping these colours in, and I will put all the colours in the description box below. I know that painting in watercolour can be tricky if you're new to painting. So what things put you off watercolour painting and why? Drop them in the comment box below. I'd be interested to know how you get past that sort of watercolour fear and push through. I'm going to add a little bit of Payne's grey to the mix because the white part of the eye isn't actually white. So this can go in the corners here. Remember, it's all about building layers. I'm going to just speed this whole thing up for you. I'm going to add a bit of lamp black to the pupil in the middle of the eye, making sure that these other colours are completely dry, of course. Using a smaller brush this time, a number 2. But use whatever brushes you have. See how I'm just blending this in like this. This is a really good tip on if you want a really softer edge towards the outside. We don't want a solid colour. It's solid all the way around here. But as it hits this highlight, we want to keep the realism. So I'm cleaning my brush, passing it on the kitchen towel, and then with a damp brush, and it has to be damp, blending that through. Just picking up the colour on the paper and just softening that edge like that. And start to build around the iris. So as I'm coming to the highlight, what I'm doing is you can see actually a reflection of the eyelashes that we haven't put in yet. Using the existing paint on the paper to pull it in, you can start to create form. Going back to the black colour, I'm going to go around this edge here. We have a line. I've got another colour mixed on my palette. It's sap green with a little bit of Indian yellow, a little bit of this yellow tone here because I think the eye has got a bit of yellow in it like this, and also some of the green tone on its own. And remember, watercolour is all about a process. So all you need to do is keep blending in those colours with the tip of your brush, dipped in some clean water, patting it on the kitchen towel like that, so it's just damp, and then just using it to blend the colours in. Do the rest of this, speed it up for you. So I'm now going to add some eyelashes to the eye so we can start really building up realism within it before we start putting in the finer detail. And for this, I'm just going to add a bit of black paint to the mix that I have on my palette here. So I'm adding a bit of lamp black to the browns. And now remember, with eyelashes, they're going to be paler on the outside edge here. So, and they're not all defined. So we can start to sort of put a few in like this. And then the base here is obviously going to be just little dots here and there. So I'm going to start to put these in, and I'm going to speed this up. A few things I would like to talk to you about. First of all, skin colours, skin tones. Now, I know when you're new to painting, it can be really difficult to assess different tones and colours. I would say this: don't get too hung up on how to mix various skin tones. The easiest way to match your colours is by looking at your reference photograph and your colour chart. I have done a colour chart here, and this is what I'm working from all the time. I'm going to put a link on how I made this colour chart on the top of the screen right now. And it really is a very easy way to match your colours. I'm going to just add a few shaded tones to the eye now, because at the moment it's looking a bit flat. So I'm going to mix my original mix of the pink tone. I use a little bit of permanent rose with a little bit of burnt umber, and I'm just going to add this to this area here to create a shadow where the eye is folding in on itself like this. I'm also going to add a bit of this tone underneath the eyelashes here. I'm going to do the usual thing by just blending it out like this, or into the paper like that. You can see how that's created a soft edge. I'm going to actually add a little bit more of black to this part here where it's really dark on the outside edge of the eye here, and we can start to put that in. The eyelashes at the moment are looking a little bit flat, so we need to add some form to those, but for now I'm just going to put this colour in and darken up the bits that we need to create form and shadow once again. And always look at your reference photograph. Some of the areas where the iris meets the white of the eye are quite dark, so I'm going to add a little bit of that tone there. You can see how that's made a difference to that part there, just where the eye meets the outside edge. Just add a little bit of colour, and think about it, although the whites of the eye are white, they're never plain white. And just blend, blend, blend all the time. With the eyelashes, I'm going to add some lamp black again to the existing colours that I have. Each of these eyelashes can now be built on. So what I'm going to do is use the tip of my brush and just go over some of them in heavier paint. So we want them to be darker here and there. On the pupil, I can now use this quite thick to start to really put in that shape. And then going back to this bit here where the pupil is, I'm going to just put a mixture of the original mix, which is the green mix with a little bit of the Payne's grey or the black. I'm going to just take this over this bit here, and I'm going to put a tiny bit of Payne's grey. The paint is now really, really watery, so when we're adding things like Payne's grey, I'm going to dilute it quite heavily. Although I want this highlight to be in place, I don't want it to be white. It needs to look realistic like this. So we've still got that highlight in place. I'm going to let that dry. I'm adding a few bits of tonal value and tonal contrast here and there. For example, underneath this bit here, you can add a bit of shading and a bit of shadow where you would naturally find sort of darker areas within the skin, and just keep building them up. It's all about making this as natural as possible and just adding bits and pieces where you feel it's necessary. But the important thing now, I think, is to start to add a little bit more detail around the centre of the eye. But before I do, I just want to add a little bit of tone here and there. So I'm going back to my number 2 size brush. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a water glaze over iris, and I'm staying away from the pupil, but I'm just going to drop this in like this, just on the iris of the eye, because we want to start building up the colour before we do anything else. So just where I want the colour to be dropped in, like this. Going back to my original mix of green with a little bit of Indian yellow, and I'm just going to drop this in where I've applied the water, and maybe a little bit on this outside edge here. What this will do is it will get a natural blur like that. As that paint is drying, I'm just going to start pulling in here and there some of the colour from the outside edge that I've just applied, the darker tone. So darker tone to the outside edge like that, and then just pulling it up really, really simply like this. So the darker tone goes on into the wet water wash, and then we can just pull it through like this. When the colour settles, we can start to put the colour back in again, but I'm just going to let that dry, pulling out that colour from the middle of the eye where the pupil hits, like this. And just picking up that colour, and whilst that paper is wet, we can start to just drop that in again, just to enhance that edge like this. So I've just added a few little veins here and there using my original mix of burnt umber with a tiny bit of permanent rose. And these actually aren't in the reference photograph, but I just wanted to give it a little bit of realism, but just using a really tiny brush just to do that. And I might just put 1 or 2 here. I don't want it to have bloodshot eyes. I just wanted to give it that sense of realism. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enhance the eyelashes now just by adding my original mix a little thicker. So we've got lamp black with a bit of burnt umber, and I'm going to start to build on and speed it up for you. So I'm just blending in the colours that I have slightly harder edges, and also sharpen up those edges that maybe need sharpening up by just using the existing colours that are on my palette right here. And you can just carry on and create that beautiful illusion of shine and gloss within the highlight of the eye, and just add a little bit of texture and depth of colour wherever you feel it is needed. I've just added it a little bit more grey towards the outside here where the white is looking a little bit too white. I'm adding grey to this part here where I think it's a little bit too white. Just add a little bit more shade here and there. I'm going to hand you back over to me. If you enjoyed today's video, then do hit that like button and consider subscribing so that you don't miss new episodes coming out every Tuesday. So thank you for watching, and until next time.